Hi, this is Marisha Trembetska on Love Your Creativity and Make Money podcast. And this episode is about deadlines being lifelines. I think that using deadlines in a really positive way can be incredibly positive for a creative career. Some creatives are incredibly brilliant about the detail, about spending the time getting everything perfect. And this is why we have these incredible musicians who can play in a way I can only dream about. But they have spent decades practicing and ensuring the reason they sound that good is because they put the time and work in. And that's an important thing. It's generally not my natural tendency that. I'm more the other type, whereas I kind of make it up as I go along and then take it on stage and go, oops. Having done this now for nearly 2 decades, my oops are pretty okay. But I've had some shockers. I've had some shocker moments from not being prepared. But that's always been, about improvisation. But I do understand that both, it's good to be incredibly prepared, but it's also good to be creative and free and not be scared to get on stage because they're all to produce your work or to show your work. Because there's definitely a very good phrase that let perfect not be the enemy of good. You've just got to make the work. And actually I use deadlines to really move my creative work forward. So, for example, let's say you have found a funding deadline that you could apply for, or maybe there's a competition, a poetry writing competition, there's a deadline, or one of those send your first chapter or of your novel or your first act of your script, whatever, and send it off to be viewed. There's something incredibly useful about committing to a deadline. That is all. I personally find external deadlines much better than internal. If you have an external deadline you can stick to, then you know what? Generally we work towards it. As creatives, we're incredibly good at making excuses for not being creative, but equally in that time where we know we have to make things happen, then we really do. So I made a singing psychic Brexit web series. So I did the pros and cons of the EU referendum in 2016. And I knew that the referendum was on June 23rd, and therefore I knew I wanted to do 22 episodes plus a live one on the 23rd of June outside Houses of Parliament. But I knew I had to have the first episode going out June 1st, so I had a daily episode going out. Different areas I ended up on, television off the back of it. I'm sure I partly got my Arts Council funding off the back of it. But the only reason it happened, because I spent 2 months doing the research myself and went, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And I was in Prague doing shows while getting this thing out on June 1st, 2016. It was mental. But deadlines means I don't back down for a deadline, and I bet you don't either. Even if you're up all night for 3 nights before, you're going to make it. So use them. I have a show called Queen of the Fucking World. I basically got some Arts Council funding for it late 2016. No? Yes, 2016. I'm losing track. And so basically I spent the early part of 2017, basically, I got some money to do the research. It's about sexual politics and why we're all judged by our sexuality, both male and female, and how we choose to use it. If we use it, our sexuality outside of marriage, or the colour or creed or positions we might get into during sex. But for me, it was a really important piece of work to do. But creating a new character was incredibly hard, pulling this show out of the ground, because I knew who she was, but I didn't know. I could hear the voice, but I just did not know anything else. And so I interviewed about 150 people, including sex workers and charities. And I did huge amounts of research, historical, just to try and... Then I had to pin it together and produce a piece of work, which I first did in Tristan Bates. And then I decided I was going to take it to Edinburgh Fringe. So I'd committed dates. I had to do a show, my first show in April, and I knew I was going to take the show for a month up to Edinburgh Fringe. This was 2017, the first version. I was also taking up my Singing Psychic game show because we will have a lot of fun. But for me, Queen was my work. It was my new character. It was very different. It was hard. It was really hard trying to work out what songs were going in, how I was positioning it. It was hard. But I kind of had no choice but to tackle the problems. And there's always problems with making work. We know it. From the actual practical of where's it going to be, what's the theatre, how we're going to promote it, how we're going to sell it, to actually what is this show even about, and what's her voice, and what does she wearing, and all that, and how do I make the music side work with the character. I mean, it was just a bit, I look back and go, oh my God, did I really do that? So I'd done a month of it in Edinburgh, and then of course the terrible kind of Harvey Weinstein stuff news came to light. So I was definitely ahead of the curve on that. But it was more about the fact I'd had a deadline. Without those deadlines of, I'm taking this for a month at Edinburgh Fringe. I'm doing my first show at the Tristan Bates Theatre in the West End in London in April of 2017. It was never going to happen. And I've done that time and time and again. I've taken shows literally globally. I did some shows last year in Adelaide, both Queen and Singing Psychic, actually. I took Singing Psychic to do Prague. I've done, but it's always because, here's a deadline. I mean, when I was about to do Adelaide Fringe, I'd thought about it for a couple of years because it's the second largest Fringe festival after Edinburgh, as many of you may know. And I was like, oh God, Australia, I know no one. But I was like, okay, I've got 5 days before the deadline of the brochure and I've got to make decisions. So I picked up the phone. Some people from Adelaide Fringe had already seen the show, so that kind of helped. So I had a few venues I was talking to, so I'd got the networking. But without that deadline of, God, if I don't decide by Friday, I'm choosing not to do it, then it would not have happened. And actually being in Australia last year and doing shows was an incredible experience. Met incredible people. I did lots of sellout shows, and there were some real highs and lows. I got dehydration. But it wouldn't have happened unless I went, oh God, it's now Monday and Friday, I've got to know. So it made me get on the phone. So I suggest that you use a deadline, an external deadline. Find one for your art right now. Because I know it's quite hard thinking, oh God, how am I paying my bills? Especially with this incredibly scary health situation with coronavirus as I currently speak. But actually having an object really helps. I mean, a friend of mine is a producer and she's producing a documentary and she's only getting applications done and edits done because, if you want it to be in Sundance next year, this is your date for admission. It's really important to use and gravitate and just use the deadline. So pick a date, pick a thing that you really want to. As I said, poetry competition, a funding deadline. Doesn't really matter what it is. Or I will often just book a gig. At the moment, I won't be just booking a gig because I don't know what's happening. But for me, that's often the way of, okay, I'm going to make this thing happen and just get yourself sorted. Right, make sure that, for example, let's give yourself 2 months and get your, Instagram set of photos done. Whatever your art is, just try and really use these deadlines. Or say, right, by Friday, I'm going to have updated my website and done da-da-da-da-da. But the bigger the deadline, the more action you'll take. It's kind of magic. Okay, bye.